Noir Plasma Chrome Bleed. Unlocking knowledge, inspiring innovation, empowering curious minds.
Like what you share.
Welcome to this explainer. I am so incredibly glad you're here today. Have you ever wondered why perfectly good companies just suddenly lose their competitive edge? Honestly, a lot of the time, the culprit is hiding right there in their accounting. Now, if you're sitting there thinking accounting is just some backward-looking bean counting exercise, well, get ready to completely flip that perspective. Today, we're going to reframe cost management. It's not some tedious historical record. It is literally the ultimate engine for modern business strategy. We're talking about designing the very architecture of a company's competitive advantage. All right, let's dive right in.
Here's a quick look at our roadmap for today's explainer. We'll cover the evolution of cost management, the core SCM framework, advanced cost management tools, strategic performance and pricing, some professional case studies, and wrap it all up with the future of cost strategy.
Section 1. The evolution of cost management, from backward-looking to strategic. To really grasp this new approach, we kind of have to look at the massive failures of the past. Traditional management accounting, frankly, it systematically failed to give us any actionable insights for modern strategy. First up, we have the old way, traditional management accounting. It was entirely internal, always looking in the rearview mirror, and relied heavily on standard volume-based overhead allocation. Why is that so bad? Well, imagine a factory manager literally ignoring a dying, absolutely crucial machine just so they don't get hit with a repair expense for the month. Why? Just to hit their budget and get a bonus. That's a classic short-term behavior flaw driven entirely by old-school tracking. Plus, using volume-based keys, like direct labor hours, completely distorts product costs today. Actually, it forces your high-volume, simple products to subsidize the complex, low-volume ones. No way to run a business, right? Now look at strategic cost management, or SCM. This is where accounting actually meets strategy. It evaluates cost behavior by directly looking at strategic choices and customer value. It's external, it's forward-looking, and it's built to give you a sustainable competitive edge. This matters because if you're still tracking costs the old way, you're probably making huge pricing and strategy decisions based on totally distorted data. Section 2. The core SCM framework. Shank and Govindarajan's tripartite model. So, how do we actually build this thing? The heart of Shank and Govindarajan's model rests on 3 pillars: value chain analysis, cost driver analysis, and strategic positioning analysis. It beautifully piggybacks on Michael Porter's generic frameworks to prove one vital point. Cost information is absolutely useless in a strategic vacuum. Think about it. Picture a bare-bones budget airline next to a 5-star luxury hotel. Should their accounting teams be using the exact same rulebook? Absolutely not. If your firm is chasing a cost leadership strategy like that budget airline, your cost systems have to be ruthlessly focused on standard cost reduction, supply chain efficiency, and hitting stringent target costs. But if you pivot to a differentiation strategy like our luxury hotel, your cost systems need to flip entirely. It's no longer about being the cheapest guy in the room. It's about evaluating the real strategic value of your R&D, your brand building, and using value engineering to maximize what the customer feels they're getting. You've got to deliberately tailor your cost tracking to your specific market goals. Otherwise, you're going to end up cutting costs in the exact areas that make your brand special in the first place. Section 3. Advanced cost management tools. Math as storytelling. I actually love calling this section Math as storytelling because these formulas are really the modern executive strategic toolkit. Let's unpack life cycle costing. Think about this staggering reality. Up to 80 to 90% of a product's total lifecycle costs are committed during the very first R&D and design stages. Up to 90%. Traditional accounting spends almost all its energy meticulously tracking manufacturing expenses on the factory floor. But by the time a product actually gets to the factory, its cost destiny is already locked in. The money is virtually spent before production even wakes up and turns the lights on. So if you really want to manage costs, you need to be in the room with the engineers on day one, not just hanging out with the auditors at the end of the year. And because those costs get locked in so incredibly early, we need tools like target costing during that critical design phase. Put yourself in the shoes of a business owner for a minute. Let's say you want to sell a revolutionary new smartphone. The old way, traditional cost-plus pricing, would have you design the phone, figure out, okay, it costs $800 to make, add your profit margin, and then just price it at $1,000. But wait, what if the market is only willing to pay $700? Well, you're dead on arrival. Target costing flips this whole process on its head. It looks out at the external market first. It basically says, look, the market is only going to pay this target selling price, and our shareholders absolutely demand this target profit margin. Therefore, our maximum allowable cost is exactly X. It sets these firm, non-negotiable boundaries based on real market realities, which forces your engineers to get creative and use value engineering to close any cost gaps long before a single prototype ever gets manufactured. Now, once we do finally hit production, we rely on tools like the throughput accounting ratio. This comes straight from Goldratt's theory of constraints, which basically says every production system is limited by a bottleneck. Think of a bottleneck like a super narrow one-lane bridge on a giant four-lane highway. It honestly doesn't matter how fast the cars are going on the highway. The total flow of traffic is completely at the mercy of that one bridge. This ratio measures throughput per bottleneck hour against the total factory cost per bottleneck hour. It is a brilliant operational pulse check. If this ratio ever drops below 1, you've got a massive red flag. Why? Because it literally means your company is bleeding cash every single hour that bottleneck runs. Your throughput isn't even covering your baseline operating expenses. It is a screaming alarm that you need immediate targeted intervention right at that specific constraint. Section 4, Strategic Performance and Pricing, Measuring What Matters. So how in the world do we measure what actually matters across huge, decentralized companies? Well, the gold standard here is the balanced scorecard. It takes high-level corporate strategies and translates them right into operational metrics across 4 totally interconnected perspectives. And this isn't just some dry checklist. It's an actual chain reaction. Check out how this flows. When you invest heavily in the learning and growth of your employees, those highly skilled workers naturally end up improving your internal business processes. They make things faster, they make fewer mistakes. Then those upgraded processes directly lead to absolutely thrilled customers. And finally, those loyal, happy customers are exactly what drives the financials you want to see on your bottom line. It's the whole shebang. This framework guarantees that the metrics you're tracking down on the shop floor are actively feeding into your grand corporate vision. Now, when different divisions inside the exact same enterprise start selling parts to each other, things can get, well, highly political. To untangle this, we use the general opportunity cost rule to set divisional transfer pricing. It's a brilliant way to balance internal performance tracking while pushing for goal congruence, which is honestly just a fancy academic way of saying getting department heads to stop bickering and actually work for the good of the whole company. Let's try a quick hypothetical. Say Division A wants to transfer a part to Division B. If Division A has a bunch of excess factory capacity just sitting around gathering dust, the opportunity cost is 0, right? So the minimum transfer price is simply the out-of-pocket cost to make it. But what if Division A is totally maxed out, running at full capacity? Transferring that part internally means they have to turn away a paying external customer. That foregone external profit, that opportunity cost, absolutely must be added to the internal price. It makes sure the company as a whole never takes a financial hit just to do an internal favor. Section 5, Professional Case Studies Explained, Putting Theory to the Test. Okay, let's jump into some real-world applications taken straight from professional CA and CMA final exams. Think about this number for a second. $1 million, $30,000. That was the massive net corporate benefit calculated in a May 2022 exam case study. It dealt with a really complex transfer pricing scenario between Division X, which was completely maxed out on capacity, and Division Y. By properly using that opportunity cost rule we were just talking about, diverting a little idle capacity, and correctly pricing the foregone external market contribution, the corporate entity saved over $1 million a year compared to having Division Y buy from an outside supplier. The craziest part? This $1 million windfall didn't come from selling more widgets. It didn't come from massive layoffs or cutting corners. It came entirely from fixing the strategic math of their internal pricing. That right there is the literal financial impact of getting strategic cost management right. Next up, let's look at the cost of quality, or COQ, through the lens of the Hotel Nico Zealand case from the November 2022 exam. This hotel was in full-blown crisis mode. Their margins were tanking even though the place was packed. When you look at the breakdown of these numbers, the problem screams at you. Over 61% of their total quality spend was being burned on non-conformance failure costs. We're talking catastrophic external failures here, massive room rate refunds, totally trashed reputations, and legal disputes. Meanwhile, what were they spending on upstream prevention? Barely anything, just 22%, which is the bucket for simple proactive stuff like staff training or basic quality audits. This proves a huge lesson for your own business.
If you cheap out on upstream prevention, it is going to directly trigger incredibly expensive external failures downstream. Honestly, training your front desk team is infinitely cheaper than settling a lawsuit or trying to rebuild a ruined brand. If we take a step back and look at how these benchmark professional exams have evolved, you see a very clear shift in what the real world is actually demanding. We've moved way, way past those isolated, purely mathematical standard costing problems. They only make up about 10% of the exam weight now. Instead, everything is shifting heavily toward these integrated strategic scenario analyses. Think advanced decision-making and performance measurement. And the takeaway here for your career or who you decide to hire is absolutely profound. The industry doesn't want human calculators anymore. They want strategic advisors who can seamlessly blend hardcore quantitative modeling with qualitative, big-picture thinking.
Let's hit one final, super modern case study. We're looking at an automated automotive plant shifting into Industry 4.0. Management set a goal, a 12% absolute cost reduction on an old legacy part. By bringing in advanced automation, like swapping manual labor for robotic assembly lines and using optical sensors to completely eliminate post-inspection defects, they crushed the target, hitting a 16.25% cost reduction. Huge win, right? But here is the critical strategic twist. Saving 16% is a massive operational victory for sure, but how do you ethically and sustainably manage the fallout of redeploying 75% of your human workforce? That requires navigating some incredibly tricky environmental, social, and governance trade-offs. It demanded serious, well-funded upskilling and redeployment programs. It just goes to show that when you reach the highest levels of this stuff, cost management is actually a deeply human strategy. Section 6, the future of cost strategy, horizons and implementation. So where is all of this heading? Honestly, doctoral research is pushing SCM so far beyond the traditional factory floor. We're seeing this massive explosion in big data analytics being used for real-time predictive cost engineering. We're having to adapt to cyber-physical systems accounting just to handle these hyper-automated AI-driven plants. But maybe the wildest part? The dramatic rise of sustainability accounting. Take carbon allocation, for instance. As global climate regulations ramp up, modern accountants aren't just counting dollars anymore. They are literally putting a strict monetary value on greenhouse gas emissions. They're treating the environment as a very real, quantitative liability right there on the balance sheet. It's a totally fascinating evolution of what the word cost actually means today. All right, so how do you, as a leader, actually put all this into practice? The Strategic Synthesis Framework gives you a super actionable 4-phase operational roadmap. Literally, tomorrow morning, you can start with phase 1, the diagnostic phase. Go in, aggressively map out your value chain, and hunt down every single ounce of non-value added waste. Then you move right into phase 2, alignment and design. Get target costing going early in your product development so you lock in those profits before production even starts. Phase 3 is execution and control, push for continuous improvement, and diligently manage those bottlenecks on the floor. And finally, phase 4 is performance evaluation. Break out the balanced scorecard to make sure your daily grind is actually hitting those big strategic targets. This isn't just academic theory, you guys. It is a deliberate, empowering manual that you can use right now to perfectly align your cost tracking with your strategic goals. Which brings us to one final, slightly provocative thought. We've seen today that costs get locked in incredibly early, that standard costing can totally distort reality, and that the math absolutely has to tell a strategic story. So I've got to ask you, if traditional accounting only counts the costs of the past, is your current cost management system designing the failures of your future? Something to think about, right? It might be time to take a hard look at your organization's accounting architecture and make absolutely sure it is actively building your long-term competitive advantage. Thank you so much for hanging out with me for this explainer, and as always, keep learning.
Like what you share.
Noir Plasma Chrome Bleed. Unlocking knowledge, inspiring innovation, empowering curious minds.